During the past several weeks and months, all of our lives have been turned upside down and inside out. We are all feeling anxiety. Um, we're uncertain. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And we are also afraid of the fallout of what this traumatic situation is for everybody. So, talking to my colleagues, Representative Gabel and Representative Gahn Dershowitz, we decided to have a conversation with NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, to discuss what we're feeling and what we're hearing from our constituents. So over the next hour, we are going to be asking our experts to answer your questions. And with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Representative Robin Gabel.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate you pulling this together. It's a very important session that we're going to be having this morning for our constituents. My name's Robin Gabel. I'm the state representative for the 18th district. I'm in Evanston and represent about 7 villages on the North Shore. So since this COVID crisis, we've seen that the state has helped many different sectors of our communities. They have helped with restaurants, with schools, with hospitals, with small businesses. They've helped gather food and housing. And I think that it's now time for us to also look at our mental health and our individual needs. I know that many of us have been going through ups and downs, and you never know how you're going to be feeling the next day, and it's difficult to get yourself centered. So I am so pleased that we're going to be hearing from NAMI experts today, and I hope that they can help us figure out how not just to survive, but really how to thrive during this period of time. So thank you again.
And with that, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Gahn Dershowitz.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to start by saying what a privilege it is to have this opportunity to serve, especially now. I am so grateful to my colleagues and our mental health professionals who are here with me today to answer questions and remind us all that we're not alone. Our world has been turned upside down, and we've lost that sense of normalcy that helps us cope with stress and anxiety. And these are not ordinary circumstances. I think it's fair to say that what we're all experiencing places us all at risk of trauma in varying degrees. So as we all do our part to protect our physical health, I think it's equally important to tend to our mental well-being. So I want to thank NAMI, thank my colleagues and Senator Fine for putting this together. And I'm just looking forward to having an opportunity to hear from our experts as to how we can help. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So now let me introduce you to who our experts are today. First, we have Nathaniel Ekman. He is the Executive Director of NAMI, Cook County North Suburban, which is an affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. He has over 12 years of experience in the mental health arena as an administrator, board member, and support group facilitator for people with mental illness. He has also worked as a nonprofit consultant with a background in fundraising. Nathaniel lives in Chicago and has a master's degree in public policy and administration from Northwestern University, which is in our district, and a bachelor's degree in urban studies from Harvard. Then we also have with us Josette Day, and Josette is a licensed clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience working with adults, adolescents, and couples. Her areas of special interest include anxiety, depression, stress and wellness, life transitions, personal growth, grief, and loss. She completed her master's in social work at Loyola University in Chicago, and currently she is completing a doctoral program in clinical social work at the Institute for Clinical Social Work in Chicago. So I want to thank our experts so much for giving us your time and your expertise today. So with my first question, it's going to be for you, Nathaniel. Why has the COVID-19 pandemic been so hard on so many people?
I think the first thing to consider for all of us is that this is truly an unprecedented situation. We've heard this on the news. No one or hardly anyone living today has been through anything like this before. This is truly unfamiliar territory, and as they say, it's also new. When situations are new and unfamiliar, we have found as mental health professionals that there is a loss of control experienced. The stay-at-home orders, the order to self-isolate, work from home, spend all of one's waking hours at home, contributes to a loss of structure, which contributes to a loss of routine. And finally, there's a loss of connection to other people, and this can be further isolating. Now, when people are isolated, symptoms of stress and anxiety can present, or if they're already present, they can worsen. Stress and anxiety can go up due to the social distancing and isolation. They can also go up due to economic factors, the state of the economy, the prevalence of so many layoffs, so many people newly out of work, the challenges of navigating the unemployment system, especially for those who have not had traditional employment, such as contractors and gig workers. Furthermore, the daily activities of life, even grocery shopping, become more stressful. Going to the store can be fraught with anxiety. People are worried about COVID-19. There are plastic shields at the cash registers. There is social distancing throughout the store. Everyone's afraid of what happens if they get within 6 feet of somebody else. We're wearing masks. And all of this is contributing to a generalized and chronic anxiety.
I'm sorry, continue.
I'm sorry. Other mental health problems can manifest when people are anxious, and when they exist already, such as an existing mental health condition, a mental illness, they can become worse. One thing to remember is that in any given year, 1 in 5 people is going to experience mental illness or a mental health disorder, and therefore 1 in 4 families is affected at some point in their lifetime. Mental illness is hard on everyone in the family, and at NAMI, we take this into account. We know that if we improve the lives of individuals with mental illness and their family members and those who love and care for them, we can do a great deal of good.
Thank you. You bring up one point that I really want to emphasize. You talked about how we're socially distancing, which I like to refer to more as physically distancing. Usually in a time of trauma, we need people. We go to people. So how does this really contradict to what our minds are thinking that we should do in this traumatic situation?
It's a tremendous contradiction. We are social beings. We gravitate towards others. We gravitate not only towards our family, we gravitate towards friends. We like to interact with strangers that we meet outside the home. So social distancing or physical distancing defies the impulse to move oneself physically towards others.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Representative Gable for our next question.
Thank you. So this is a question for Josette. Many people are having difficulty dealing with all the unknowns of this crisis. They're wondering when everyone will be able to get back to work, get together with a group of friends, or hug their parents without worrying about making them sick. How can they manage this uncertainty?
Right. So all of the unknowns and the uncertainties that we're dealing with the coronavirus in general cause people to feel like they have no sense of control or a greatly reduced sense of control. And for most of us, feeling a lack of control is a really frightening feeling. So one of the best ways we can deal with sort of the uncertainties of things that are truly not in our control in this instance is to shift our focus kind of back to the present. So when I say shifting our focus to the present, I'm really talking about pulling our thoughts and our worries away from the future back to today and thinking about what we can do today. That can be, if you're able to still work, can I work? Can I call a friend? Can I take a walk? Can I prepare a meal? Can I do a project around my house? But by staying in the present, it brings us back to having a sense of control in this moment, in this day, and that helps reduce our overall sense of stress and anxiety.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I was thinking, that we need to just deal with one day at a time, 1 hour at a time. So thank you for that great advice.
Thank you. Representative Gon Gershowitz for our next question, please.
Thanks, Laura. Josette, this question is also for you. Um, Many parents like me are worried about their children's mental health. Teens are missing graduation, prom, and other milestones. And younger children are stressed or depressed about the situation that they see around them. I know that, speaking for myself, this physical distancing is difficult for us. And I'm curious to know what advice you might have for parents who are looking for how this might be impacting their children.
Right, good question. So as we know, and as we've all been acknowledging, children of all ages, and of course, all of us as part of the family can experience stress and anxiety and depression as a result of the coronavirus. So as a parent, in your role as in that role, you want to be looking for any significant changes in your child's typical patterns of, say, eating or sleeping, or noticing any increased signs of what we would say agitation or irritability, or even self isolation from engaging with family or even peers virtually. In younger children, you will probably see some different behaviors, things more like what we might think of as meltdowns or tantrums, or fearful or clingy behaviors, because younger age children are going to know that something's wrong, but they won't necessarily understand how to put it into a bigger context. For your older kids, your tweens and adolescents, you may see more withdrawal into their rooms, less engagement with others, lack of interest in even usual activities that they could still engage in but maybe aren't, a refusal to do schoolwork or just to participate in the family. The most important thing overall, I could say, for parents is to help provide structure and routine for your children by maintaining a regular rhythm for sleeping, for meals, for schoolwork, excuse me. All those things help children feel safe and secure. Um, so it's important as much as possible to keep those routines. And parents should also feel free to be open and communicate openly about if they notice these differences. You don't want to leave them unacknowledged in your children. So check in with them. How are they feeling? What do they think they need? And as part of that, for parents, practicing really good self-care. The children always take their cues from their parents, and if they sense that mom and dad are in a good place emotionally and managing their own fears and anxieties, that's going to help them feel more secure and more confident in the circumstances. And when you do communicate with your children, you want to for sure acknowledge that it is difficult. And it's difficult for them and it's difficult for the whole family. And then you want to remind them and reassure them that they're safe and that they're secure with you and that it will pass and you'll all get through it together. On a more practical note, I also think it's really important because so many children are missing good milestones, important milestones, whether it's birthdays or graduations or other kind of big events. So I think you should plan to celebrate what and how you can. So even in our kind of limited ways, if you have a senior who's graduating, plan a mini graduation ceremony at home with maybe some special words of encouragement, virtual or live, and gifts and some good food, anything to mark the moment. It's really important, even in hard times, to mark and savor and celebrate those good moments.
Josette, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. I have the next question, and this is for Nathaniel, and this came from a constituent, and I can totally understand this question because it's something I'm feeling as well. It says, with kids doing remote learning and parents working from home, many families are struggling to get along in a small space. What can they do to make their living situations easier on their mental health? I know personally, my husband and I are empty nesters, but when this happened and my kids had to leave their college campuses so quickly, one of my sons had 2 friends that couldn't get home. So we went from a house with 2 people to the past month and a half, we've had 6 people in our home. So how do we struggle with these changes?
I think it's really, really important to recognize and accept that having everyone in the house all the time will be a challenge. We're not used to this. Most of us haven't done this or haven't done it in a while. Um, Establishing a routine is key. Keeping a schedule, setting a schedule and sticking to it that will maintain the structure of every day and of your life as the weeks and months roll by. I think also if we distinguish between weekdays and weekends, it can be very helpful. Everyone looks forward to Friday. So if Monday through Friday are defined one way and the weekends are defined in another, there's a cycle that is preserved similar to what we experience as people who go to work or school in normal times. Distinguish between work time and family time. Respect boundaries, not only of the types of time, but of one another. And set rules on how space in the home is going to be used according to the time of day or the day of the week. Some parts of the house may work equally well for work and having fun. Others fall more neatly into one or the other. So it's important to recognize where is work time and work space versus everything else. It's easy to lose motivation or become frustrated or unhappy when this structure is missing. So stick to that plan, keep at it. And finally, I'd say have a sense of humor about this and be patient. We really are learning this all together.
Yeah. I love how you said separate the weekdays from the weekends and look forward to Friday, because I think many of us are feeling like every day is Groundhog's Day. And so it's nice to think about, okay, we need that separation and the differentiation to see where we can go from there. So thank you so much. Robin, for our next question.
Sure, thanks. This question is for Josette. This crisis has caused mental health problems for those who haven't experienced them before, but it can also really exacerbate existing mental health conditions. We heard from one parent who is worried about her daughter who is recovering from an eating disorder. What warning signs should they be looking out for, and how can they offer support?
Good question. So just as a sort of background to that, during periods of high stress, there's always a tendency for what we would call old symptoms or patterns of behavior to reemerge. This is a very common reaction to stress. So just to normalize that part for people, because even parents and other people who might be listening might be noticing that even in themselves. But in this instance, for this example, let's talk about this parent. So she might want to be on the lookout for any, again, significant changes in her child's behavior. The child might be more depressed, more tearful, more withdrawn, eating less, exercising more. So again, any big blips that are different from what she's typically been doing. And in this circumstance, again, very helpful if the parent can model some open communication and talk with the daughter about what she's feeling, what the parent might be observing. We definitely would not want the concern to go unaddressed, because it implies that it's not important. Incorporating mindfulness practices like a yoga practice or a meditation, all great resources that can be found online or with apps. And other tools like journaling or art or music are all helpful strategies for both expressing feelings and discharging stress. And then in an instance where there's a greater concern for the person's safety, the child's safety, definitely reaching out to a therapist if they have one, or setting something up, even if it needs to be virtual at this point.
Thank you. I think that that's good advice for all kinds of mental health issues, including substance abuse, probably, and other things. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And Representative Gongershwitz for our next question, please.
Thanks, Laura. Josette, this question is also for you. We've been talking about the working from home being a huge change for many people. For those who are new to this practice, how can they make sure they're keeping a healthy work-life balance? I think you talked a little bit earlier about structures. And I know for myself, with working from home, pretty much we're always at work. And so it's really hard to set boundaries. Is there any good set of rules that we can all abide by that will help us create those boundaries so that there is still a separation between work and family?
Yeah, I think I'll have Nathaniel answer this one, because we had talked about this a little bit earlier. Nathaniel?
About a healthy work-life balance. Many things that help maintain the quality of life for families at home are clearly applicable to adults who are striving for a healthy work-life balance. We're all people. Um, I think that setting aside a dedicated workspace, as I mentioned before, that will minimize interruption and maximize privacy is key. The routine, the schedule that I mentioned before, also very important. The distinction between weeks and weekends. And setting boundaries, again, respecting working hours. It's important to try not to make work and home one and the same. Set a quitting time for your work and stick to it. Don't always be in the office or vice versa. This is going to take trial and error as we all work to maintain a healthy work-life balance. It's going to take time to get it right. And as the saying goes, this too will pass. When circumstances change and we go back to old routines, getting back into the office will be a challenge. So give yourself time to learn the old routine again. Returning to an office means returning to a group setting, and that can have its challenges. So don't hesitate to bring those issues or challenges to the attention of other coworkers or to management. They're there to help. So is HR when things require. And on the other side of this pandemic, the new normal will also be new for everyone. So let's lean on one another and get through it together.
Thanks, Nathaniel. I think you sort of touched on it a little bit, my follow-up question, which was just that I hear a lot of anxiety about the return to work. We have all now sort of internalized this need to socially distance, to stay at home. I sometimes struggle as a parent with how much information to share, especially depending on the ages of my kids. And I think similarly, we're all getting different information, different parts of the country handling the situation differently. Do you have any advice for how people can take control of or feel like they can take control of that transition once we do start to think about opening up a little bit?
Well, I'm biased in this regard because I'm with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI. I think that taking care of one's mental health is central to this process. Look out for yourself. How are you feeling and how are you doing? If you aren't doing well, or if you're experiencing problems that you feel you can't work out by yourself or with others who are close to you, seek resources, get help. And it doesn't have to be therapy with a professional. It can be. It can also be community-based supports such as we offer. We at NAMI Cook County North Suburban offer support groups for people experiencing a mental health struggle, support groups for their family members. We can connect you with resources that have to do with health, employment, housing, anything you can think of, legal resources that will help you navigate this period of change. So take care of yourself and ask for help.
Thanks, Nathaniel. I appreciate that. I think it's always important to remember, even if we feel physically okay, we might not feel mentally okay stepping out. So thank you for that reminder. And Laura, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that response as well, because we need to do away with the stigma of mental illness, because just as you were focusing on right now, mental illness and physical illness, they go hand in hand. And it's not a weakness to say that you need help, and it's okay to reach out for that help. And I think that's something that we all need to remember. Josette, I have my next question is for you. It's about frontline workers. And this question came from a frontline worker, especially healthcare workers. They're experiencing heavy stress and unique traumas at work. What are some tips for dealing with the long hours, demanding shifts, and anxiety about catching COVID-19?
Right, great question. So I would think about, given the enormous personal sacrifice made by frontline and healthcare workers, the focus when they're not working really needs to be on their own self-care. And so the goal, sort of in an ideal world, would be to try to be as emotionally and physically healthy as possible during this time by really practicing safe and healthy habits. So when I'm using the phrase self-care, good self-care, I'm meaning ensuring they're able to get as adequate sleep or as much sleep as possible, eating healthy food, having even time for small amounts of exercise if possible. I know hours are limited. Other healthy strategies would include getting time outside, if at all possible, time to talk with close friends, or family members to process some of the stress of their work and get some emotional support. And in particular, around the work stress, talking with friends or coworkers who can really validate what their experience is, because they have a unique experience being on the front line. And that can be very helpful to not feel so alone and isolated in the experience. And for sure, if they're feeling too overwhelmed to cope with the demands of the position, reaching out, again, whether it's to coworkers, friends, or families, or some other mental health professional or group or organization.
Yeah, and I think it's important to recognize too that one thing that I'm also hearing from these frontline workers is part of the anxiety is I'm healthy, I'm trying to protect everybody around me, but I don't know. Am I one of those carriers that's
Right,
infecting other people and I don't even know that I'm doing it?
right. So
And
that's a bit of the control thing we've talked about earlier, which is that's the worrying about the unknown and worrying about something that we don't have control or an answer to. So then pulling it back to best practices. What are their best practices in the context of their environment? Whether it's the personal safety, personal, whatever they call it, protection equipment, washing hands, all those kind of things they would be familiar with, but knowing that they can do the best that they can do in any situation, which is all we can do,
right.
especially when
And
there's so much unknown.
And moving forward, it's not like we're going to switch turn a switch and that trauma is just going to go away. So the question then is, how do we get back to normalcy or whatever that normalcy might be?
For a lot of the frontline workers, I happen to have, I am currently working with several people who are in hospitals, frontline workers. I think there's no time now because they are in such a crunch, obviously. But I think after the pandemic subsides and is at more manageable levels, I think there will need to be ideally some concentrated programming at people's places of work to really process a lot of this trauma they've been exposed to, the sudden deaths, the uncontrollable, the overwhelming workload, the feelings of loss. For any sort of frontline worker, I think it's going to be a big component of the healing and sort of transitioning back to something resembling more normal or the new normal.
Great, thank you. Representative Gable.
Thank you. So this is a question for Nathaniel, and I think it probably came from one of my colleagues because this question talks about extroverts, which most of us in this field are. Extroverts and those with tight communities outside the home are having an especially difficult time adjusting to social distancing. When we can't go out with friends, visit family, or attend church services, what can we do to feel less alone? Nathaniel.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, social distancing is an unnatural tendency for many people as we are social beings and we gravitate towards one another. Now, for extroverts, that's even more the case because they really gravitate towards other people. And almost all of us have some trouble adopting social or physical distancing from others. There is no substitute for physical proximity, but despite this, we can be creative and we can find ways to feel less alone. My first recommendation is taking walks. Walks provide a change of scenery. They bring fresh air. It's physical exercise that will work your heart and your lungs. It can improve one's mood. It can calm and refresh you. It can also help sort out or clarify difficult thoughts or feelings that you may be having during this challenging time, from being cooped up in the house all the time, from having to deal with others close to you all the time. Walks are a safe way to bring yourself closer to others without being directly in contact with them. Remember, maintain the 6 feet. Also, when you take a walk, if you're in an area with other pedestrians, it's perfectly okay to smile and say hello. We don't have to look away just because we're wearing masks or observing the 6-foot rule. Now, aside from taking walks to get connected and to feel good, it's a great idea to keep in close contact with your family and friends. You can call, you can text, you can video conference or use FaceTime. Virtual visits, and I know this firsthand, can be almost as much fun as live ones. So check in on each other at least once a week and maintain those bonds. You can also continue learning by attending virtual lectures, some of which are participatory. Virtual lectures, mini courses are offered all over the place. You don't have to look very hard for them through video conferencing. The chat function on many of these will allow you to ask questions. So you're taking part in the discussion. You are with others virtually. Many faith communities also are offering services virtually, and you can take advantage of these. I think social media in many ways brings us together, but it can also intensify feelings of anxiety or isolation. So use it wisely, set a policy on time limits and stick to that. And again, seek help if you're struggling and you're feeling alone. Resources such as NAMI are great and can connect you with others in the community who can help.
Great, thank you. I think that I agree with much of what you've said. A friend of mine who's an extreme extrovert, very soon after we had the at-home policy, started setting up Zoom dinner dates with friends. So you would each bring your food to the table and have a dinner together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there are definitely creative ways. I know my kids have been doing a lot of Zoom game nights with their friends. And it's amazing what you can find online to be able to play these games electronically. And it's a connection, and we all need that connection. So thank you. Representative Gon-Gershowitz for our next question, please.
Thanks, Laura. And I think this one is for Josette. We've been talking about the different ways that everyone is experiencing trauma, but I can only imagine the trauma that somebody who has lost a loved one due to this pandemic is going through, especially given that we're hearing that in many instances, loved ones cannot be present. And so one of the questions that we received was what advice you might have for how to deal with the death of a loved one when you cannot be with family and friends through grief, and how you cope with the additional trauma of physical distancing when you're grieving.
Right, right. Isolation related to the virus, of course, is devastating for people who have experienced a recent loss, for sure. Loss in and of itself is an enormous disruption in someone's life, and the virus only exacerbates that impact. So along the lines of that some of you have mentioned, certainly doing virtual visiting of some kind. I've heard of people doing virtual memorial services and sharing photos of loved one and doing remembrances via Zoom calls and those kind of connections. Great way to connect or try to stay connected with loved ones over a loss. I would also encourage there are the pieces around the loss, but because it is such an unsettling time for somebody who's had a loss, I would also encourage anyone in that situation to really try to stay involved in any other activities, hobbies, relationships that are meaningful to them, to keep the connection and maintain some sense of routine and normalcy given how disorienting it can feel. And for sure, I think reaching out to some kind of support group or therapist, just because that is an enormous trauma to deal with under present circumstances, especially if somebody is alone or lives alone. It's really nice to get some other outside support.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think we're all looking for ways to connect and also to help others. So be interested to have you share some of the resources for some of these support groups later in this session, so that if folks are needing an opportunity to reach out, they know where to go to find those resources. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And speaking of resources, and either Nathaniel or Josette can answer this question, a lot of people are facing issues that they never thought they'd deal with right now. We have people who are suddenly unemployed, and the rug was pulled out from under them economically. They are now depending on food banks and unemployment insurance, where if you asked them 2 months ago, this was not the path that they were on. And so now they're facing these mental health issues and struggles and feel like there's nowhere for me to turn because I can't afford it. What does NAMI offer to someone who might need help managing their mental health care but can't afford it?
I can speak to that. NAMI, first of all NAMI services are offered free of charge to anyone who needs them, regardless of income level. That's one thing that sets us apart from some mental health organizations. Our support groups are completely free and open to anyone who wants to participate. Anyone can call our helpline to learn about resources that may be available to them with employment, with unemployment, with disability benefits, connecting with legislators who can help. And in addition to what we offer in the way of groups and classes and resources, there is low cost or free care available if people are knowing where to look for it, and we can help connect people with that too.
Great. And there are a few more ways that people can get free of charge mental health services that I do just want to mention. Governor Pritzker began the Call for Calm program, and the state of Illinois mental health hotline, if you text the word talk or hablar to 552-020, again, that's 552-020, you will be able to connect with a community mental health counselor. And they will be able to also advise you where you can get free services. We also would be remiss if we didn't mention the domestic violence hotline. And advocates are available 24/7, and that number is 800-799-SAFE or 7233. And they're counselors that will be able to serve people in more than 200 languages. Calls are always free and they're always confidential. And then, of course, the suicide prevention hotline is something that we really need to get the information out there about. And that's 800-273-8255. So I think it's very important that people realize that they're not in this alone, and there's help out there, and you just have to ask for that help, and that help will be available to you no matter whether or not that you can afford it. The help is there, because this is a situation that we're all in together, and we need to all come out of it together as well. So with that, I'm going to pass the next question on to Representative Gable.
Thank you. Thank you for those great numbers. I think that everybody needs to know that there's help out there. So the question that I have is for Nathaniel. It is many older adults, particularly those in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and even independent facilities for the elderly, are feeling isolated during the pandemic. What are some ways our seniors can safely keep in contact with friends and loved ones? As you know, most of the nursing homes they don't allow any visitors right now, so their usual visits are gone.
Well, older adults certainly experience levels of isolation that can exceed those of others. And I think this is especially true if you live alone or if you're in a facility where you're kept apart from others due to the social distancing requirements. And certainly the pandemic has intensified these feelings. The stay-at-home orders, as you mentioned, translate into fewer visitors or no visitors. There's also a reduction in physical contact, no handshakes, no hugs, and that can be draining on a soul. So keeping in touch with friends and family is really important at this time for everyone, and I think very much so with seniors. The same methods of staying in contact that apply to everyone else apply to seniors. Phone, if someone doesn't have a mobile, of course there are landlines, texting and email, video conferencing like Zoom. And I think one thing to point out is that if seniors are not familiar with any technologies or don't feel comfortable using them, those who work for nursing homes or assisted living facilities can assist them with it so that they stay in regular touch with those who matter.
Yeah, great ideas. I have heard of some of the staff at these institutions.
Okay. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to pass it on to Representative Gone Gershowitz for the next question.
Thanks, Laura. So this question relates to addiction and substance abuse. And the question is, with bars and restaurants closed and most people working from home, some have started drinking alcohol more heavily than they used to. How can someone know whether they have a problem? And I think a related question, with respect to avoiding developing a long-term addiction or dependency is, do you recommend or can you share any intervention strategies for family members who might be concerned?
Right. Okay. So the increased use of alcohol, or we could also think of it in terms of food, smoking, vaping, whatever, during this time, is often used as a means to cope with the stress and the anxiety and boredom. It's helpful to understand the context in which the alcohol is playing a role in somebody's life, and help look at alternatives to help them manage the stress in different ways. So one of the questions is, can the person cut down their consumption, or and choose another activity that will enable them to help manage their stress level in a different way? And it could be some of the things we've talked about, taking a walk or reaching out to somebody that you're missing and talking to, reading a book, watching a movie. So those would be like healthy examples of healthy alternatives to always using, that you could substitute, or when you're cutting down in place of using the alcohol to that extent. Um, it's important to think about the use of the substance, because when people are feeling hopeless, they often feel like what they do or don't do in their life, that it doesn't matter and it's somehow meaningless. So part of what we need to do is remind ourselves and keep ourselves in our perspective in a healthy way, in that the crisis will pass and they want to be in a good place physically and emotionally to resume life once we're able to do that. Um, if there is a concern about some kind of more serious dependency or addiction, places like AA and other groups and organizations do online support and have been doing it. So those would be good places to reach out to, because if there was a need for further intervention, they can advise on that. And it's a good source of support for the person, maybe like a spouse living with somebody who's overusing a substance, would be like an Al-Anon or something like that, where you can get support as the person not using. But in
Okay, great. So now I just want to wrap up here. Nathaniel, I'm wondering do you have some final words that you'd like to let us know to help us get through these next, hopefully not too long, until we figure out what our next normal is. Oh, Nathaniel, I think you're muted. There you go.
My only advice is to say that mental health truly matters. It matters every bit as much as one's physical health. They are interrelated. If you don't take care of one, you can't take care of the other. And we really are only as well as we feel. So look out for yourself, look out for your family and friends and other loved ones. And we're in this together.
Great, thank you so much. Those are wonderful words for us to start wrapping up on. Oh, Catherine, you're back. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
I was going to
I'm sorry, Josette.
That's okay. I was going to add two other quick things. Sorry, I don't know if my connection dropped or what, but two other practices that can be extremely helpful in any of these situations. And the first is to practice daily gratitude, which I know sounds simplistic, but it's so easy for us to lose ourselves in the worry and the fear. And if we can shift our focus to anything that we can appreciate in our own daily life, literally, whether that's that we have food or housing, those sorts of things, that is extremely helpful. And we know from research that really can help us manage depressive symptoms. And the second is helping others helps us. So if there's any way you can reach out to be a bright spot in somebody else's life, whether that's through a phone call or an encouraging note or any kind of donation of time or service you'd be able to do, I think that's another really helpful way of getting us out of our own heads and thinking about the bigger picture.
Absolutely. It's that random act of kindness that you never know how it's going to impact the next person.
Absolutely.
So, and I have to say my daily gratitude today is for both you, Josette, and Nathaniel. I can't thank you enough for your time, your commitment to such an important cause. It's people like you who are going to be able to help us figure out what the next normal is. So Nathaniel Ekman and Josette Day, thank you for your time and your efforts. NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, you're there for us, and we can't tell you how much we appreciate it. And to my friends and colleagues, Representative Gable and Representative von Gershowitz, who fortunately I can turn on Zoom and see your friendly faces. You're helping me get through this time as well. So thank you all for joining us today. If you need help finding any resources, we're here for you. And we're all going to get through this together. So thank you all so much.